Hello, everybody. So for my topic, I decided to go with traditional country music, and more specifically, kind of the culture as it relates to Los Angeles. So basically, country music kind of hit the scene in the late 1910s. This was kind of like Southern Appalachian fiddle players kind of set this up, and but it really didn't become its own until kind of like the 1920s. And the first kind of real country album that was commercial that was actually recorded came out in 1922. But really set this kind of genre off, how it ties into Los Angeles was in Hollywood. They had a whole bunch of kind of country western movies and TV shows and that kind of thing going on in the era of the 1930s and 40s. And basically, they came up with these soundtracks for these movies, and it kind of portrayed, and put a face as this cowboy guy who was really admirable and stuff, which really kind of replaced the face of the previous kind of symbol, which was kind of more of a hillbilly guy, which really wasn't as positive as, let's say, a cowboy that was a star. So that really set it off. People started to buy soundtracks, and they're like, wow, this country genre actually maybe has something going for it. Then we fast forward, we get to the 1950s, and there's this thing that was out. It was called the Bakersfield Sound. Now, what this kind of was is you had certain aspects of kind of rock and roll, this rockabilly kind of honky tonk sound coming in, and basically had his own sound during this time. Then we kind of fast forward into the 1970s, and this is kind of referred to as the outlaw movement. So they kind of put aside all the traditional stuff and kind of was like, you know what, maybe a little bit anti-establishment kind of style going toward it, and basically kind of created this whole new look for the genre. So, kind of toward the late 70s, this outlaw movement was kind of fading. We get into 1979, and it's kind of like now we're looking into this urban cowboy kind of scene. And this one particular movie was basically a big contributor to that. It was called Urban Cowboy. It kind of set the standard for now more of a pop country kind of thing going on. Then we kind of get into the modern era, which was referred to as the class of 89. And basically what that means, is there's a whole bunch of these people from the 20th century and kind of became really popular during this time. So some of these artists like Alan Jackson, Clint Black, Garth Brooks, Travis Tritt, and Dwight Yoakam all kind of got their first country hits in 1989. And this kind of set the tone for more of getting us into the current modern time. Um, Basically, they infused this youthful vitality of rock and roll kind of mentality into the genre that was kind of growing stale, over the last, several decades. It really hadn't changed a whole lot, and it kind of needed revival. People were kind of getting bored with, you know, the older sound. And then we kind of get into this modern era, which was basically from like 2000 to now. And this is new millennium kind of brought this new sound to country music, and you started to see this gap being bridged where there was kind of more pop and rock beats, even hip hop and kind of R&B music was kind of sampled and tested and infused into the country genre. And they basically, the more traditional sounds, of the 1960s and the 1970s, and the artists that were kind of popular then were becoming a thing of the past. People were moving on. They were looking for some new sounds that kind of brought it into, what was more pop culture of the time. And now we even have, all kinds of stuff. You can even see parts of, you've got dance kind of music being incorporated into country, and you've got, pop stars that maybe, half, mid-career go toward pop, or they go toward country, or they have this thing that's called pop country, and that's pretty interesting too. But that's kind of what I got. I thought it was interesting to learn more about country music because it was probably the most least familiar genre that I was familiar with, and thought it would be kind of cool to tie into Los Angeles because that's where we all are, and found it really interesting that you know, it's only really came around within the last 100 years or so. I've always kind of thought it'd been around for longer. But if you have any questions, throw them in the comments and I'll try to answer them the best I can. Thanks.